The Galactic Assembly had existed for 12,000 years. It was a great hall floating in space where every intelligent species came to talk, argue, and make deals. Hundreds of alien races gathered there. They discussed trade, war, peace, and everything in between. The assembly was loud. It was messy, but it worked. When humans first arrived 300 years ago, nobody paid much attention. They were a young species from a small blue planet. They had just learned to travel between stars. The older races looked at them the way adults look at children trying to join a serious conversation. But humans were stubborn. They talked and talked. They asked questions that nobody had asked in thousands of years. They challenged old rules. They demanded to be heard. Some races found them annoying. Others found them refreshing. But everyone agreed on one thing: humans never stopped talking. Ambassador Park had represented Earth for 15 years. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. When she spoke, the whole assembly listened. A race of tall, four-eyed traders feared her clever words. The Crimson Collective, giant insects who thought they were superior to everyone, respected her strength. Even the Pale Ones, the most ancient beings in the galaxy, paid attention when she stood up to speak. Had won many battles with nothing but her voice. She had stopped wars. She had created alliances. She had made humanity matter in a galaxy that once ignored them. So when she stopped talking, the galaxy noticed. It happened at the 4891st Summit of Species. This was a big meeting where important decisions were made. The trade minister had just finished a long speech about mining rights in a distant part of space. It was boring, but it was important. Many species wanted those resources. As was the custom, Ambassador Park was expected to respond. Humanity had interests in that region too. Everyone knew she would have something clever to say. She always did. Stood up from her seat. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned to look at her. Translation devices hummed softly, ready to convert her words into hundreds of languages. She looked across the room. Her dark eyes moved slowly from one delegation to another. She looked at the Crimson Collective. She looked at the Pale Ones in their floating chairs. And then she sat back down. She said nothing. The silence that followed was unlike anything the assembly had ever experienced. For a moment, everyone thought there must be some mistake. Perhaps she was sick. Perhaps the translators had broken. The minister blinked all four of his eyes in confusion. His blue skin turned a shade lighter, which meant he was nervous. "Does the human representative need more time?" he asked. "We can wait if she needs to prepare her response." Did not move. She did not speak. She simply sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm and empty. Behind her, the rest of the human delegation sat just as still. Her aide, a young man named, stared straight ahead. Captain Lee, the military officer assigned to protect them, stood like a statue. None of them made a sound. Perhaps the translation system has failed, another delegate suggested. Should we call for technical support? But the humans showed no sign that they even heard the question. Minutes passed. The assembly began to whisper. What was happening? Why were the humans acting so strangely? Had something terrible happened on Earth? Was this some kind of protest? The speaker of the assembly, an ancient pale one named Ev, finally spoke. His voice was like wind through dead leaves. Ambassador Park, the assembly requests your response. Silence is unusual. If there is a problem, please inform us. Looked at him. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. It might have been sadness. It might have been anger. It was impossible to tell. Then she looked away. The meeting continued, but nothing felt right. Other species gave their speeches. Votes were taken. Decisions were made. But through it all, the human delegation sat in perfect silence. They did not vote. They did not comment. They did not even react when their name was called. When the session ended, the humans stood up together and walked out. They did not stop to talk to anyone. They did not answer any of the dozens of questions shouted at them. They simply left. That night, messages flew across the galaxy at the speed of light. What had happened? What did it mean? The humans were famous for their endless talking. They gave opinions on everything. They argued about the smallest details. They could turn a 5-minute discussion into a 5-hour debate. And now they were silent. In the following days, officials from many species tried to contact the human delegation. They sent messages. They requested meetings. They showed up at the human embassy. Nothing worked. The humans would acknowledge visitors with a polite nod. They would accept written documents. They would even share meals with other diplomats. But they would not speak. Not a single word. Ambassador Park sat in her office, looking out at the stars. Her aide stood nearby, equally quiet. On her desk was a folder full of urgent messages from a dozen different species, all demanding to know what was happening. She did not open any of them. Outside her window, ships from across the galaxy flew past, carrying beings who had spent centuries ignoring humanity's voice. Now, suddenly, they were desperate to hear it again. Allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The galaxy was finally learning something important. Sometimes, the loudest message was no message at all. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than any words ever could. And humanity had a lot of silence to share. 3 weeks had passed since the humans stopped talking. 3 weeks of silence that grew heavier with each passing day. The galaxy was starting to panic. Human ships still flew through space. Human colonies still operated. Human traders still delivered goods, but none of them spoke. They communicated only through written notes, and even those were short and cold. Yes, no, agreed, declined, nothing more. Admiral commanded the Third Fleet near the edge of known space. His ships patrolled the border between human territory and the regions controlled by other species. In the old days, his communication officers were always busy. They talked to passing ships, exchanged news with alien captains, and kept friendly relations with their neighbors. Now the communication room was silent. Over 200 messages had come in from nearby alien fleets. All of them were asking the same thing. What is happening? Why won't you respond? Please talk to us. Admiral read every message. He answered none of them. His crew followed his lead. They went about their duties in perfect quiet, speaking to each other only when absolutely necessary and never to outsiders. The alien ships watching from a distance grew more nervous each day. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons were powered down, but everyone knew how quickly that could change. And the silence, the terrible, endless silence, made everything feel like the calm before a storm. Far away, on a space station called Harmony's Reach, a different kind of fear was growing. This station was neutral ground where species could meet and work together. Thousands of beings from dozens of races lived there. Among them was Dr. Han, a human scientist who studied alien life. Had worked on the station for 6 years. She had friends among the aliens. She ate lunch with them. She celebrated their holidays. She was known for her warm smile and her endless curiosity about other cultures. Now she sat alone in her laboratory, working in silence. Ambassador Ka of the Crimson Collective found her there one evening. Ka was a giant insect, standing 3 meters tall with a hard shell the color of dried blood. His species believed they were the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. They looked down on everyone else. But even Ka was afraid now. "Dr. Han," he said, his mandibles clicking nervously. "I must speak with you, please. What is happening to your people?" Looked up from her work. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no sadness, no fear, just calm patience. "The assembly is paralyzed," Ka continued. "Nothing can be decided without human input. The think you are planning to attack. The pale ones have retreated to their home worlds. Everyone is scared. You must explain. You must tell us what we have done wrong." For a moment, something changed in his eyes. It looked like she wanted to speak. Her lips parted slightly. Ka leaned forward, hopping, praying that she would say something. But then her mouth closed. She turned back to her research tablet and continued working. Ka stood there for a long time waiting, but no words came. Eventually he left, more frightened than when he had arrived. Because the humans had always been talkers, they filled every silence with words. They explained things that did not need explaining. They apologized for things that were not their fault. They were, the other species often joked, addicted to their own voices. So what did it mean when they chose silence? In the great war rooms of powerful empires, military leaders gathered to study the situation. They looked at maps showing human fleet positions. They analyzed every piece of information they could find. They searched for clues about what humanity was planning. A scholar named No worked in the Neutral Archives, a great library that contained knowledge from across the galaxy. He spent days searching through human history and literature, looking for anything that might explain their behavior. What he found made his blood run cold. He called an emergency meeting with the Galactic Council. When the leaders of a dozen species gathered, he showed them what he had discovered. "Humans have done this before," he said, his voice shaking. "In their history, silence was often used as a weapon. When someone is so angry that words are not enough, they stop speaking. It is a warning, a final warning." He displayed ancient human texts on the screen. "Beware the anger of a patient man," one quote read. "Silence is the most powerful scream," read another. "Still waters run deep. Beware what lies beneath." The council members looked at each other with growing horror. "There is more," continued. "In human warfare, silence before battle was considered sacred. Armies would march in complete quiet before attacking. They believed that silence focused their anger, made it pure and deadly." The representative spoke up, his voice trembling. "Are you saying they are preparing for war?" Shook his head slowly. "I am saying something worse. I am saying they have stopped trying to prevent one." The room fell into terrified silence. For 300 years, humans had argued and debated and negotiated. They had been annoying, yes. They had been loud. But they had always been talking. And as long as they were talking, there was hope. There was communication. There was a chance to fix problems before they became disasters. Now that voice was gone. And the galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. By the second month, the galaxy was falling apart. Without humans to balance discussions, old enemies began fighting again. The Crimson Collective had hated each other for thousands of years. When humans first joined the assembly, they had worked hard to keep peace between these two powers. They hosted meetings. They suggested compromises. They found solutions that nobody else could see. Now, without that calming voice, the old hatred returned. Both sides moved warships to their shared border. Both sides accused the other of preparing to attack. Diplomats tried to negotiate, but without human help, the talks went nowhere. Other conflicts erupted across the galaxy. Trade agreements collapsed. Alliances crumbled. Species that had cooperated for centuries suddenly remembered why they had distrusted each other in the first place. The pale ones were the oldest species in known space. They had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. Their elder, a being called then, had seen 17 different empires turn to dust. He understood history in ways that younger races could not imagine. And he understood that something had gone terribly wrong. Then traveled to Earth itself. His ship was ancient and slow, but powerful enough that no one dared stop it. He requested an audience with the Human Unified Council, the group that led all of humanity. To his surprise, they agreed to see him. The meeting chamber was large and cold. 7 humans sat in a row before him, their faces calm and unreadable. Among them was President, a man famous for his powerful speeches. In the old days, his words had moved billions of people to action. Now he simply watched in silence, then began to speak. His voice was soft and ancient, like wind blowing through empty ruins. He talked about history. He talked about the bonds between species. He talked about all the good things humans had brought to the galaxy. "You have given us so much," he said. "Your art, your music, your strange and wonderful ideas. You taught us to see the universe in new ways. You made us question old beliefs. You brought change to a galaxy that had grown tired and stale." The council listened. Their expressions did not change. Then continued for 3 hours. He spoke of philosophy and purpose. He appealed to reason. He appealed to emotion. He begged them to explain what had happened, what had driven them to this terrible silence. Finally, his old voice grew weak. He had nothing left to say. For a long moment, nothing happened. The council members sat perfectly still, watching him with patient eyes. Then President raised one hand. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it meant something. A young woman stepped forward from the shadows. Her name was I.M., and she served as an assistant to the council. In her hands was a single document printed on real paper, an old human tradition for important matters. She placed the document on the table in front of Elder then. He looked down at it with his ancient eyes. It was a list. Every broken promise the galaxy had made to humanity. Every treaty that had been ignored. Every time the Assembly had voted against human interests while pretending to be fair. Every species that had stolen human technology and claimed it as their own. Every council meeting where human concerns had been dismissed as childish or unimportant. The list went on for pages and pages. 300 years of small cuts. 300 years of being treated as less than equal. 300 years of smiling faces hiding contempt. Then read it all. His ancient heart grew heavier with each line. He remembered some of these events. He had been present when they had human ship designs and refused to pay for them. He had watched when the Crimson Collective had taken credit for medical discoveries that human scientists had made. He had said nothing when the Assembly had laughed at human complaints. Everyone had treated humanity like children pretending to be adults. They had patted them on the head and told them to be patient. Someday, they said, someday you will be taken seriously. Someday you will matter. Someday never came. No words were spoken in that chamber. No accusations were made. The document said everything that needed to be said. Then looked up at the council. 7 human faces looked back at him. They were not angry. They were not cruel. They were simply tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of arguing. Tired of begging to be heard. For the first time in his ancient life, then understood what true shame felt like. His species had watched countless younger races grow and struggle. They had always offered wisdom and guidance, but they had never truly listened. He stood slowly, his old bones aching. He bowed deeply to the council, a gesture of respect that the Pale Ones rarely showed to anyone. "I understand," he said softly, "and I am sorry." He turned and walked out of the chamber. The council watched him go. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. The message had been delivered. Now it was time to see if the galaxy would finally understand. Outside, then's ship waited to carry him back to the assembly. He would tell them what he had learned. He would show them the document. He would make them see what they had done. But deep in his ancient heart, he feared it was already too late. Some wounds ran too deep for words to heal. And humanity had been wounded for a very long time. The breaking point came not from words, but from fire. They were afraid. Their leaders had spent weeks watching the silent human fleets patrol the borders. They had heard the rumors. They had seen the fear spreading through the galaxy, and fear made them do something stupid. Their military commanders decided that the silence must be a sign. The humans were planning to attack. They were gathering their strength. They were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So they decided to strike first. A fleet of 30 warships jumped into the system containing a peaceful human colony. 17,000 people lived there, scientists, farmers, teachers, and their families. The colony had no military ships. It had only a small hospital, a research station, and homes filled with ordinary people living ordinary lives. The attack lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the colony was burning. Buildings had collapsed into rubble. The hospital was nothing but smoke and ash. Thousands of humans lay dead in the streets, killed not in battle but in their homes, in their beds, in their schools. The commander broadcast a message to the human ships that arrived too late to save anyone. His voice was shaking with fear and anger. "This is your fault," he screamed across the void. "Your silence forced us to act. We had to defend ourselves. If you had just talked to us, this would not have happened. Say something. Respond to us. Speak." Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of her flagship, the HSV Undying. She was a woman of 40 years, with gray starting to show in her black hair. She had served in the human fleet for her entire adult life. She had trained for war but always hoped it would never come. Now she looked at the burning colony. Orange flames painted the darkness of space. Smoke rose from a world that had been peaceful just hours ago. Behind her, officers at their stations wept silently. Some covered their mouths to hold back sobs. Others simply stared, their faces wet with tears. But no one made a sound. Commander did not respond to the message. She did not scream in rage. She did not demand answers or threaten revenge. She simply stood there, watching the flames, her face as still as stone. Then she raised her hand and gave 3 orders. She did not speak them. In the weeks of silence, her crew had learned to communicate through hand signals. They had practiced until they could understand each other without a single word. The first signal positioned her fleet. 20 human warships moved into formation, surrounding the force with cold precision. The second signal raised weapons to full power. Lights flickered across every ship as massive guns charged with energy. The third signal was the simplest. Commander made a fist, then slowly opened her hand. Release. What happened next was not a battle. They had sent their best ships to attack the colony. Their defensive fleet was scattered across a dozen systems. They had not expected the humans to respond so quickly or so quietly. Human weapons fired in perfect silence. There was no sound in space, of course, but there were also no battle cries on communication channels, no demands for surrender, no threats or warnings. Just light and fire and death. The commander tried to call for retreat. He tried to surrender. He begged for mercy. His voice screamed through every communication channel, desperate and terrified. The humans did not answer. Ship after ship exploded. The flagship was cut in half by a single precise shot. Escape pods launched in all directions, only to be ignored. The humans did not waste weapons on fleeing survivors. In 19 minutes it was over. The attack fleet was destroyed. Broken metal drifted among the stars, mixing with the ash still rising from new. The few surviving ships fled at maximum speed. Their crews carried a message back to their empire, a message of pure terror. The humans had not said a word, not during the battle, not after. They had killed with the same silence they had shown in the assembly chamber, cold, methodical, absolute. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Every species heard the story. Every military commander studied the reports, and every leader finally understood the truth. For 300 years, humans had talked. They had complained and argued and demanded. They had been annoying. They had been loud. But that noise had meant something important. It meant they still believed in communication. It meant they still thought problems could be solved with words. It meant they still had hope that the galaxy would listen. The silence meant that hope was gone. When humans talked, you could negotiate with them. You could find common ground. You could make deals and compromises. When humans were silent, there was nothing to discuss. There was only action, pure, terrible action without warning or mercy. On 100 worlds, leaders called emergency meetings. The emperor locked himself in his chambers, terrified that human ships would appear in his sky at any moment. The Crimson Collective pulled their fleets back to defensive positions. Even the Pale Ones, who feared nothing in the universe, began to pray. Commander stood on her bridge long after the battle ended. The fires of Nu still burned on her. 17,000 people gone. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply waited. The silence continued, and the galaxy trembled. The Emergency Galactic Summit was the largest gathering in history. Every species sent representatives. Great ships filled the space around the assembly station until the sky looked like a field of metal stars. Leaders who had not left their home worlds in centuries made the journey. Ancient rivals who refused to be in the same room now sat side by side. Fear had united them all. The main chamber was packed beyond capacity. Beings of every shape and size pressed together, their translators humming with 1,000 languages. The air was thick with tension and desperation. And at the center of the room, on the highest platform, one chair remained empty. The human seat. For 6 hours, species spoke. The Emperor himself appeared on screen, his 4 eyes red with shame. He apologized for the attack on Nu. He offered to pay any price for peace. He begged humanity to forgive what his people had done. The Crimson Collective admitted that they had stolen human technology. They promised to pay everything they owed. They said they had been arrogant and foolish. Smaller species shared their own confessions, broken treaties, ignored agreements, years of treating humans like children who did not deserve respect. One by one, the galaxy apologized. The human delegation remained in their ship, orbiting the station. They did not come down. They did not respond to any message. Finally, Elder then rose to speak. His ancient body was weak, but his voice carried across the chamber. "I have seen what we have done," he said. "I traveled to Earth. I read the document they showed me. 300 years of partnership, and we treated them as tools instead of equals. We took their ideas and claimed them as our own. We dismissed their concerns and laughed at their dreams. He paused, his old eyes filled with sadness. We called them children. We told them to wait. We promised that someday they would matter. His voice cracked. But we never meant it. We never truly listened when they spoke. He turned to face the empty chair. Perhaps that is why they stopped. Silence fell over the chamber. Thousands of beings held their breath, waiting, hopping, praying. And then a door opened. Ambassador Park entered alone. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. She walked slowly, with perfect calm, until she reached the central platform and stood before the assembled galaxy. Every translator device hummed with anticipation. Every eye watched her, looked out at them all, the ancient ones and the young races, the proud empires and the small colonies, all of them waiting for her voice. When she finally spoke, her words were quiet, almost gentle. You have heard our silence. Now hear our terms. Behind her, the door opened again. Her aide walked forward carrying a document, not the old list of grievances this time, something new, something different. He handed it to Ambassador Park, and she held it up for all to see. This is not a request, she said. This is not a negotiation. These are the requirements for humanity's continued participation in this assembly. She began to read. New treaties that treated humans as full equals. Permanent seats on every major council that had excluded them before. Recognition of human contributions to galactic civilization. Full payment for all stolen technology and ideas. Protection guarantees for every human colony. And one final demand. The officers who ordered the attack on Nu would face justice. These terms are not flexible, continued. They are not starting points for discussion. They are the minimum we will accept. The representative raised a trembling hand. And if we refuse, what then? Smiled. It was a small expression, cold and patient. Then you will learn what our silence truly means. Not weeks, not months. She let her words settle over the chamber like snow. Forever. She did not need to explain further. Everyone understood. If the galaxy refused these terms, humanity would simply stop engaging. They would withdraw from the assembly. They would close their borders. They would become ghosts among the stars, present but untouchable, watching but never speaking. And after the destruction of the fleet, no one doubted what that silence could become if pushed too far. The vote was not unanimous. Some species grumbled. Some complained that the terms were too harsh. But in the end, fear won. The terms were accepted. Ambassador Park nodded once. Then we have an agreement. She turned and walked toward the door. But before she left, she stopped and looked back at the assembled galaxy. One more thing, she said. We did not stop speaking because we had nothing to say. We stopped speaking because you refused to hear. Remember that. The next time humanity goes quiet, ask yourselves what you are not listening to. She walked out. The door closed behind her. And just like that, it was over. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. New treaties were signed. Old wrongs were made right. Humans took their place not as junior members begging for respect, but as equals demanding it. The memory of the Great Silence never faded. On every world, in every school, the story was taught. It became a lesson that children learned before they learned to count. When humans speak, listen carefully. They are telling you what they need. When humans argue, be grateful. They still believe you can understand. But when humans fall silent, look inside yourself. Ask what you have done. Ask what you have failed to hear. Because their silence is not empty. It is full of every word you refuse to listen to. And once that silence falls, you may never hear their voice again. The galaxy learned this lesson well. They made sure never to forget it. And humanity, finally, had found the respect they had always deserved. Not through begging, not through arguing. Through the simple, powerful act of refusing to speak until someone was ready to truly listen.